Chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and I'd like to note that we're starting the meeting at 7:07 p.m. We are live streaming the meeting on NVTC's YouTube channel, and tonight we're very happy to see a new face here. I'd like to welcome Fairfax City Council Member John Staley, who got the word it's Purple Day, so thank you for wearing the purple. Alan too, we've got the purple going. He is serving as Mayor Reed's alternate for tonight's meeting, and so very happy to see you here. It is alternate night. We also have Dan Stork, and appreciate him changing, I believe, his schedule to be here tonight to serve as the representative as Jeff McKay's alternate, helping us reach our quorum requirements. Good to see you. Love the shirt too. Our board administrator has already confirmed we have an in-person quorum. Quorum is pretty tight this month, so please don't leave the meeting without checking in with Rhonda first. I think restroom is okay. Just don't wait forever.
Is there a time limit?
Yeah, make sure we're not voting. Yeah,
time limit on the restroom break.
After the votes. Okay. We will need you all for the action items, as well as those to allow those members participating electronically to continue to participate. And we do have the following commissioners who have requested to participate electronically. Jen DeBrule is participating virtually as she lives over 60 miles from the meeting location. Takis Karantanis is participating virtually for a personal reason due to travel out of the country.
He's stranded in Greece.
Is he stranded? Is that even a thing? Stranded in Greece?
Yeah, he's on an island.
Yeah.
You're making it better.
Seas are high. There he is. He can speak for himself.
I say, I like those glasses. And do we have Paul? No.
No.
Okay.
So it would just be those two.
So I think it's just those two.
Yep.
At this moment. Just a reminder, a little different this meeting, our electronic participation policy was updated at our last meeting, so we do need to take a vote to approve the request for electronic participation. Some of us are used to that in our own meetings. Could I please have a motion to approve Commissioners DeBrule and Karantanis? Second, excellent. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Perfect. All right, the motion passes. Moving on, I do trust that you all have reviewed the agenda, and thank you those of you who maybe are joining us last minute. Before we move into the agenda items, I've asked our executive director to provide a look ahead to some of the major things that will be happening throughout the end of this year. We have quite a bit on the agendas. She'll also share any public comments that NVTC received for this month's meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, we did receive a public comment this month that came in earlier and was shared with all of the commissioners. The public comment came from the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and it was regarding NVTC's endorsement letter to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority regarding the Fairfax County's Seven Corners Ring Road project. And just a brief little summary, as they've outlined significant concerns and urging removal of 2 car lanes on each of the arms of the proposed ring road. But they strongly support the Route 7 BRT and the transit-oriented development plans for Seven Corners, but they're concerned that the wide cross-section that's being proposed for the ring road would undermine the opportunity for a livable, walkable community. And so again, we did share that letter with all the commissioners, and I know we're going to have, that's coming up a little bit later, so I'm happy to repeat those comments at the time in the agenda if we need to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me just add, because I know this is a Fairfax County project, though not in our districts, those of us who are here, we do appreciate that, and we will actually be I will be pulling it from consent agenda so that we can have a brief discussion on it. I know appreciate FCDOT staff. It's also here because we are just looking at the overall project, knowing that it's especially tied to BRT, but that it is a Fairfax County project.
Great. So if I could, coming back from the summer, we do have a number of activities that are happening this fall, so I just wanted to give a couple highlights. We do have a lot of actions related to our WMATA committee later this fall, both in meetings and brought to the full commission. We do have our annual report on the performance and condition of WMATA, my goodness. And that will be accompanied by a technical report by our consultants as a result of our working group that we have working in that area. We also will be talking about, of course, a part of that is WMATA's fiscal outlook, looking ahead to 25 and beyond. We are right now wrapping up a successful Ride With Us marketing campaign. Hopefully folks have been able to see it either on streaming or hearing on radio stations. So we're going to have the statistics from that. Overall, it's been so far a very strong campaign, especially in our Spanish language markets. So we'll be happy to give you the stats at the time when that comes in. We are in the process of developing our 2024 legislative and policy agenda, and really talking about the strategy for the General Assembly session. Talk a little bit later how we did have our Legislative and Policy Committee meeting last week. The action for that, and we also pick up legislative agenda for VRE, is going to be at the December meeting. I'm going to provide a little bit more information tonight, but you do have a save the date and reminder for our joint legislative forum. This year will be in Arlington, not Springfield, and it's going to be on a Friday morning, not a Monday morning. So we'll talk a little bit about that more, but we definitely want to see lots of folks at that. Commuter choice, you're going to get a preview tonight for 66 call for projects. That will be going active a little bit later this fall, as well as we do our annual report on sort of the performance metrics related to commuter choice. Envision Route 7, a lot of activities. We were going to have one part of that project being talked about tonight. But one of the things that we're going to be bringing back and talking through is our strategic implementation plan. Sort of here we are today, where do we need to go? And so we'll be bringing that. We'll also actually have a brand new senior program manager that we hope to introduce all of you to at our next meeting. So he's not come on board yet. Zero emission strategic plan. I had the opportunity to join several others here at the presentation of the FTA grant to WMATA at the Cinderbed Garage. Just a little bit about that project. It's funding to basically look to electrify the Cinderbed Garage that WMATA has, but Fairfax Connector will also benefit from that. Those are the types of things we want to identify in our strategic plan, where there are opportunities for our regional transit systems to work together, and a number of different things. So we're going to be previewing that and accepting the findings of that a little bit later this year. We also will be coming back with another regional bus analysis, which is not just about when we get to our zero emission, but strategically in general, how well our bus systems are working together, as well as our strategic research plan that we'll also be presenting a little bit, the award for a little bit later. And then finally, we are starting to put together two major events for next year. 2024 is the 60th anniversary of NVTC. And so we plan on holding a policy symposium in June to really highlight a lot of the research topics that NVTC has been studying, but also bringing in outside folks to share expertise in that area, as well as a celebration in September. So there'll be a lot of things related to that you'll be hearing about. We do hope to be celebrating 60th anniversary of NVTC all year. A special thing that will be happening at that celebration in September next year is we actually have staff are creating a documentary. And you may have seen in newsletters and other things, we've actually had the opportunity to interview a number of former commissioners, and several of you may also be interviewed for that. That's still in the works. So that's something very special. There's a lot of history, a lot of things that NVTC has been involved in the 60 years we've been around. So we're very excited to be able to preview that, or premiere that, I should say, at that September event. So there'll be lots of things on that. As we look into the fall, we have a lot of committee meetings. I know we're working on scheduling. Hopefully things are starting to solidify and land. Program Advisory Committee and WMATA Committee meet on Thursday, September 21st. Sort of one's at 4 and the other one is at 6. And Thursday, October 19th, we plan on having a joint Legislative and Policy Committee and WMATA Committee. I believe that is at 6 p.m., doing the best we can to meet everybody's schedule needs. And all of those are going to be in person upstairs in our offices. So there is a lot. I appreciate your patience through all of this, but we like giving you a preview because we're going to have some full agendas for this meeting in the coming months. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kate. And definitely feels about twice as heavy this time, the newsletter. So
yeah, it's a summertime. A
lot has been happening, and really appreciate commissioners who have been able to go out to some of the events and ribbon cuttings and join you in that, and some great discussions have happened. So at this point, we are on to July 6th. Ooh, it was a while ago. July 6th commission meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 6th commission meeting?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Commissioner Stewart? Others? Okay. Tagus, I can't tell if you're raising your hand or not.
I think he said aye.
Did you
Are
say
we
aye?
able to
Okay.
do a roll
I
call?
stand aye.
Oh, okay,
Alright.
perfect.
And
Stacey
Mr.
Ellen,
Brule
aye.
can vote tonight, Madam Chair.
Excellent, okay. She can?
Yes.
Jen, do you have
Aye.
a vote? Aye, perfect. Wonderful. I can't see you, sorry, I forgot about you. Okay, therefore the motion passes with one abstention. All right, and as mentioned tonight, we do have 4 actions on the consent agenda, but I would like to remove item D from the consent agenda for separate consideration. The item is authorize the chair to send a letter of endorsement of Fairfax County's application for Northern Virginia Transportation Authority funding for the Seven Corners Ring Road project. And to that, first of all, as you can tell, there are quite a few agencies, jurisdiction, well, one jurisdiction involved in this, and one district within one jurisdiction. And so I have asked staff to hold that so we can have a brief conversation. But I'll go ahead and move the remainder of the consent agenda. So minus item D, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Excellent. So Ferranti and Bagley's a second.
Madam Chair, before we do that, I
yeah.
just wanted to clarify with regard to the sponsorship terms and conditions that legal counsel has reviewed that.
Yes, it has.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Good question, and I know. If I may, the sponsorships will allow and enable no NVTC funds to be used.
For the events we had
the
planned for
events.
next year, yes.
Hopefully Kate doesn't have to make too many calls, but I think it'll be a wonderful event, and I trust that we will have wonderful sponsors who will help cover the costs. Wonderful. So we do have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Anything from online? Okay, perfect. To that, hearing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
And Mr. Brule?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, wonderful. So that passes. I apologize. Next time I will do a roll call vote for them beforehand. And so now I will turn to item D, authorizing chair to send a letter of endorsement for Fairfax County's application for the MVTA funding for Seven Corners Ring Road project. And if you want to, Kate, if you want to give some brief reminders. Since you
Sure,
have that in front of
absolutely.
us,
So,
we did receive
as I
some-
mentioned, the letter was provided to all of the commissioners earlier today. And so the letter outlines the concerns from the Coalition for Smarter Growth regarding and urging the removal of 2 car lanes on each of the arms of the proposed ring road. And further that they are strongly supportive of the Route 7 BRT and the transit-oriented development plans for Seven Corners, but are concerned that the wide cross-section proposed for the ring road will undermine the opportunity for a livable, walkable, and transit-oriented Seven Corners.
Thank you. And so to that, I do have some background that I'd be happy to share with the commission on the project. It is a long-term project, and where we are now, what this letter is endorsing, as well as what the next steps are, and some of the conversations that I've had both with staff and as well as with the Coalition for Smarter Growth on this project. So a little background on the project, the visioning efforts began in 2012, and the transportation studies were completed 2014, Board of Supervisors adopted in 2015, and the phasing study, which is where we are now, was ongoing from 2020 to 22, with quite a bit of engagement with the community, with the stakeholders, and especially, this is in the Mason District, so with the Mason District Supervisor's Office and their team. The purpose of the study really was to determine the planned improvements. Those of us who know Seven Corners know it is a place we like to avoid, driving or walking through Seven Corners. And hopefully this will make it better for all involved, both those who live and work in the area, as well as those who pass through on their way to work or home or around the community. As we know, for NVTC, our purpose is just to stay, no pun intended, within our lane. The importance of this project is, and as a strong champion of BRT 7, we do need to ensure the improvements happening around Seven Corners and the lanes and the ability to do BRT. And so for us, we are not getting into too much of the details of the actual project. It is a Fairfax County project, but endorsing it, and hopefully we'll get some funding to be able to continue the studies. The design is not at all finalized yet, in order to continue to move this project along. As you've heard, it is longstanding and definitely needs appropriate funding in order to continue. Assessing and evaluating and improving the multimodal travel conditions are critical, and I know staff and the community have worked on that. And it would include a ring road. They've looked at the intersections and making sure that there's ability, as was mentioned, for BRT, for bike and pedestrian improvements, keeping in mind that it is still a very important throughway for the community. And so to that, the only other thing I want to mention is that where we are in this is really the study to pursue grant funding and to start the design process. So that, I believe, is the next step, that design process and then construction. And I know that our staff and those involved, the stakeholders, and especially Coalition for Smarter Growth, and those of us neighboring this area are very committed in ensuring that as we continue, hopefully receiving the funding, the design process can continue to be refined and ensure that there's the ability to have a safety for all users, to be able to get people through, around, and between all these points safely and expeditiously as possible, and to continue to connect our many jurisdictions in this very critical roadway. So I think I will pause there, and happy to see. Before I turn to you, I don't know if any of my Fairfax County colleagues want to add to it. Our Transportation Chair, Walter Alcorn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I think you did a good job explaining it. I would just point out, I think most of the concerns that I expressed by Coalition for Smarter Growth are design. We don't get into the design details of the project here. Clearly, it's supportive of the BRT project that's going to help facilitate that, and so I'm very comfortable with
And, yeah, and if I can add, I want to mention, we really, truly appreciate the advocacy and the role of the advocates, especially Coalition for Smarter Growth, to ensure that we continue to focus on the multimodal aspects and on the safety there as we balance, and the word balance being so critical, the components of this project. Commissioner Garvey and now Commissioner Snyder.
Yeah, thank you. So my understanding is if the design process hasn't been completed, that the ring road may be very much changed by the time the design is finished, yes? Correct? So we're not really like saying that the ring road, yeah, I just wanted, that's sort of the bottom line. And then does this come back to us for a vote somewhere further on in the process? I imagine it does, but I'm just checking, maybe not.
I don't know. I'm going to turn to Kate. I know at this point it's, I believe it needs to be funded. And so this is, we're supporting it. It is not our project. It is not our funding stream. And so happy to turn to Kate. I think the critical points are directly linked to the BRT project.
So indeed, the action that's being asked today is for NVTC to send an endorsement letter to go along with Fairfax County's application to the authority for funding. So it becomes part of their package. And so
it's Fairfax project.
It's Fairfax County's project, so it's our endorsement letter.
You'll probably be voting on it, but.
We as a board will go to end with the future Mason District supervisor will continue to look at the more specific design and details of the project.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Snyder.
And Madam Chair, the City of Falls Church obviously has a great interest in this project. We work with Fairfax County staff. We'll continue to work with them. Seven Corners needs a lot of work, and we share the concerns of Fairfax County and the Coalition of Smarter Growth on moving pedestrians and bicyclists, and especially BRT, through that area much more safely and efficiently than can be done today. So we'll look forward to continue to support it. And I might add something that's been said before, which is the Commission is really endorsing the transit part of this. And indeed, one could argue that action actually helps make sure that the BRT and the other transit elements, in fact, will remain in the project. I don't think we need that, but in case that's a question, in fact, that actually strengthens that. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Commissioner Snyder. That's a really good point. I appreciate both that as neighbors, we see this as very much needed improvement, but that our endorsement on the NVTC side really, that's a good point, will help hopefully cement that the multimodal, and as we continue to look at the designs, as we know, BRT has not been designed in this section yet, that this will help us continue to move that work forward. Any further questions or discussion on item D? Okay, seeing and hearing none, could I have a motion to approve item D of the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Wonderful. Any further discussion? All right, let me start with a roll call of those participating electronically. Mr. Brule?
She may be having audio problems.
Okay.
We are having audio problems. It keeps going in and out, just so you know.
Okay. It did say she's talking.
How about a thumbs up?
Takis, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. The audio quality is barely audible right now, and we have technical issues here. Aye, it's my vote.
Thank you. We will take aye. Wonderful. And still, Mr. Brule, I believe we cannot hear her yet. Okay, we'll try again. So then, therefore, could I have all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And one more time, Mr. Brule? Okay, still no luck.
My vote was aye.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you,
And-
Ms. RPT Director. Happy to have your vote.
And Madam Chair, I do understand there's a big storm going through Richmond right now, so that may add some complexity to that.
Okay, wonderful. Good times. Hopefully, we will have a safe storm, but lower temperatures all around. Therefore, I believe the motion passes. Thank you all very much, and thank you, and I really want to thank our CDOT staff who are with us here today, and happy to answer any additional design questions as we continue through that. Therefore, we are now ready to move on to action item, section 4, the report from our Virginia WMATA board members. We do not have our main board members. I believe they're still not with us. No, okay, so we do have, they could not be with us here tonight, so we do have NVTC staff to give a WMATA report. I'll turn it over to Kate, and then we do have our committee chair and WMATA alternate, Walter Alford will follow with his report.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just highlight a few items that were included in your written report. In July, the WMATA board received an update on the Blue Orange Silver Capacity and Reliability Study. The study was started in 2019. It seeks to identify a project or a package of projects that could be addressed by WMATA in the future, focused on constraints, crowding, reliability, and operational flexibility within that corridor. WMATA staff reviewed the public engagement and potential alternatives that have been developed to date and laid out the next steps and engagement process for the fall that will lead to a board's anticipated selection of a locally preferred alternative. In July, the WMATA board also received an update on the Better Bus initiative, which includes various efforts like zero-emission bus implementation, the bus network redesign, and bus priority. As I mentioned earlier this evening, WMATA was recently awarded a $104 million grant from the Federal Transit Administration to convert the Cinderbed bus garage in Lorton, Virginia to a fully battery electric bus facility to help them purchase battery electric buses and to develop a workforce training program. This actually was the largest grant provided under this program under the Federal Transit Administration this year. So it's actually really quite significant. And as I mentioned earlier, Fairfax Connector is also going to benefit from that because they intend to use that same garage for future Richmond Highway buses. WMATA staff also showcased their new rear door smart trip targets that's going to allow all door boarding on certain Metro bus lines. As a part of the bus network redesign, we're also looking forward to WMATA's release of a draft visionary network in early 2024. Since the commission last met, there have been some fare product updates that I'd like to note to the commissioners. The WMATA board did approve a student transit program agreement with Arlington County, expanding the county's iRide program for students to include eligible Metro bus routes. WMATA also announced that the Virginia Tech has joined the UPass, the University Pass program, which provides unlimited trips on Metro Rail and Metro Bus to full-time students during the school year at a discounted rate. The WMATA board also authorized the issuance of dedicated capital funding revenue bonds. The $797.8 million bond sale, which settled on August 17th, will fund capital projects across WMATA's capital improvement plan. Dedicated capital funding was essential to advancing the capital program. And again, just something I know we've heard a little bit about before, we're going to hear a little bit more, is that dedicated capital funding debt capacity is projected to be exhausted by as early as FY 2029. We've had this conversation about fare gates here around the commission. So WMATA has installed new fare gates to stop fare evasion. The fare gates are 55 inches tall. That's almost as tall as me. And make it difficult to jump over. So data from the metro shows that the higher the new fare gates and how they are higher, they're reducing fare evasion by more than 70% at the stations where they've been installed. Courthouse actually was one of the first stations to receive the new gates. So I go and encourage you to check them out. I also want to note that Metro is now publishing both paid and unpaid ridership data on its online ridership portal. So we actually can capture some of that data in terms of fare evasion. And so the idea is showing a more complete picture of total ridership to the public. And lastly, there was I think pretty much within the last 24 hours or so, more rail service is coming to Metro Rail starting on Monday, September 11th. Metro is going to be improving service frequencies on the red, blue, silver, green, and yellow lines to meet the demand and ridership growth. The service increases will add more than 6% more trains today, and represents delivering almost to the 97% of what they had anticipated over the course of this fiscal year. So they're really ramped up. And Madam Chair, that is the report from our WMATA colleagues.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you stepping in for them. And now we will turn it over. So any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Alcorn?
I hope not.
We love putting you on the spot, Kate. We'll now turn it over to the chair of our WMATA committee.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and I'll try to speak loudly as if I were speaking to a distant Greek island. So our next WMATA committee, as mentioned earlier, is coming up on Thursday, September 21st at 6 p.m. It's going to be here in person at the NVTC offices. So at that meeting, we're going to get an update on work that's being done to examine some potential future revenue sources. And these are designed to hopefully, for once and for all, get WMATA on the path to long-term sustainable financial sustainability. So that's going to be the discussion there. We're going to hear an update on that. Also, we're going to get an update on the 2023 annual report on the performance and condition of WMATA. And this is the report, of course, that we submit to the governor and the General Assembly each year. And then, as was also mentioned earlier, on October 19th, the WMATA committee is going to be meeting jointly with the Legislative and Policy Committee to talk about how all of these really important topics inform our 2024 legislative agenda. So, as always, all commission members and everyone is invited to attend the WMATA committee meetings, and we'll see everybody in a couple weeks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Alcorn, and hopefully many of us can join that for the important discussion on WMATA. Yes, Mr. Ferranti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I could use a refresher if one of us knows. Maybe Kate, you might know. It's the end point to this study on the various. I know this is. I sort of wanted to hold my question until after Walter had his, Commissioner Alcorn had a chance. The end point to the study on the alternatives. Do we know when that concludes, or is that something that I just don't recall off the top of my head with the blue, the different alternatives?
If I could, Madam Chair, Greg Potts,
Yes.
do you have some information on when the blue, orange, silver will be wrapping up?
So the board is going to be asked to approve the locally preferred alternative in the near future.
Okay.
But again, that doesn't imply a funding commitment or agreement.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of many steps.
Beginning of the beginning of the beginning.
Right.
But hopefully a beginning. Okay, that's helpful. And then I just wanted to mention, briefly related to the report, is just on zero emission bus. I know we've talked a lot about it, but staff provided a briefing for me, and Both thought it was on battery electric buses as in addition to fuel cell and natural gas. It was so helpful and so informative. And I may follow up to see if there's any updates since that briefing. But I thought it was worth highlighting here since we've had so much discussion with your commission, Madam Chair. So-
No, absolutely.
And did an outstanding job, and it was so informative and makes me want additional briefings.
All right, well, your wish is that, no. Ms. Matthijs, I do believe that we will be getting the full commission in our October meeting, hopefully.
I was going to say, it is a little bit later this fall. We will be coming back with staff level, sort of initial conversation of staff recommendations on the zero emission bus strategic plan with the action to accept the report and any recommendations early in the new year.
And then I guess if any other commissioners want to be as lucky and fortunate as Mr. DeFerranti, staff, I assume is available as well if they would like some individual
Absolutely, as always.
2x2 updates. Wonderful. And feel free to reach out to me or to Kate especially if you would like that. Okay, I saw Commissioner Faust and then Commissioner Barry.
Yeah, Laura, I think you said that there was going to be a meeting where you're going to discuss potential funding sources to address the long-term financial needs. Have those funding sources, potential funding sources, been identified? And if so, can you share with us?
They are the subject of some tactical work that NVTC staff is doing and continues to do in collaboration with other stakeholders. We're going to be getting a report, correct, in a couple weeks by that working group. And I think at that point, that's when we're going to at least start to get the list of potential.
And Madam Chair, if I could, so indeed, we have some consultants providing technical work for us. So we are waiting to see what they put together to present to the committee for consideration. And so, so that is, it's staff level. Obviously, if the commission wants to pursue, any, proposing any type of revenues or what we can do, that is obviously, for the commission to take that action. But we have some economists doing some look at revenue sources at the request of the committee.
And that will be brought back to the...
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Timelines?
Well, and so that is later this fall as a part of our annual report on the conditions and performance. And Madam Chair and Mr. Chair, one of the things that we do plan on diving in as well at the next WMATA committee meeting are actually potential reforms and cost savings and other things that NVTC may find high priority for WMATA to do as a part of that. So there's sort of two parts to this conversation. And so we plan on bringing both of those so that we have technical staff providing guidance to the committee and the commission for any future actions that you wish to take.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, and to that, so we don't have timing yet, but there will be some information, not necessarily that at the September 21st.
Yeah, my understanding, so for our September WMATA committee, we'll be diving into some of the opportunities for cost savings and other reforms. And then the revenue may be a little bit later.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Good question. Yes, Ms. Barbie.
So actually, very simple. Again, when is this meeting? Was it 21st?
So September 21st, 6 p.m.
6
right
p.m.
here in person.
Yeah.
Upstairs, that's the
Thank
WMATA
you.
committee meeting, yes.
Yep, that's the
Definitely a meeting not to be
We'll talk
missed.
to you
So
guys.
I think those of us who aren't generally part of the committee, definitely a good one to try to attend in person.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Brown.
my understanding is the information that's coming from the consultant and NVTC staff will be helpful because it will have an action item, whether it's a cost saving or a revenue source, and have some cost estimate associated with it or revenue estimate. So we wouldn't be having the discussion in the dark. We'd actually get a sense of what kind of scale different options would provide in terms of revenue or cost saving. So.
on my calendar.
Excellent, thank you. And just to clarify for that day, we do also have the Program Advisory Committee at 4 p.m.
Yes.
And that we understand needs to remain at 4 p.m.
Yes.
Correct. Perfect.
6.
So 6 p.m. for WMATA. And here or upstairs?
Upstairs.
Upstairs.
I'll resend out emails to all the commissioners.
Excellent, thank you. Rhonda's on it.
All right.
Good, all right. Any further questions on the WMATA reports? A lot of work coming up this fall. Wonderful. So next up, we do have our Transit Resource Center, 5A. We have an action, and there's Xavier, to accept the findings of the Envision Route 7 Phase 4-1 Mobility Study. We do have an action before us tonight to accept the findings of the Envision Route 7 Phase 4-1 Mobility Study related to the proposed bus rapid transit route from Tysons to Alexandria. As NVTC's Transit Resource Center Senior Program Manager, Xavier Harmony, will share with us, this phase specifically focuses on the City of Falls Church segment of the corridor and does not make any recommendations on a preferred scenario. Rather, it was conducted to provide the Falls Church City Council, we do have Councilmember Snyder with us here tonight, technical analysis and initial public input needed for them to make the final decision about how the BRT will operate in Falls Church and the infrastructure that would be needed. To explain and clarify, Fairfax County has that first portion entirely within the county, so has been doing the outreach and work, the Tysons section until it reaches Falls Church City. And so once we're in the city, NVTC and Xavier's team have been doing that work to provide that information and guide and information to the council. Xavier, if you'd like to go ahead. But sorry, before that, I don't know, Mr. Snyder, if you have any comments or if you'd like to wait until the presentation.
Oh, wait.
Okay, excellent, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll start by saying this will probably be maybe the last time you see me present on this project because this project is getting its own program. So I'll still be the Transit Resource Center person, but this project is getting a life of its own in a way and will be its own thing. So next time you see this on the agenda, it will probably be under its own heading. So next slide, please. So our standard beginning of the Route 7 project. This is the overview going from Tysons down through Alexandria via Falls Church and East Falls Church Metro Station, 7 Corners, as we've talked about already. This is a project that's touching 4 jurisdictions, which creates particular benefits for the region, but also some challenges. Next slide, please. So there's a lot on here, but this is kind of showing where we are right now. So we've gone through a few phases already. We are right now in phase 4-1, the mobility study. This is following the section, evaluating the section that goes from about I-66 through to 7 Corners. Phase 4-2 will be beginning in the winter, and that'll be going from 7 Corners through to Alexandria, finishing off the corridor. After that, we'll be going through the design, environmental analysis, and all the way through construction, and hopefully, before long, the actual service will be in operations. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a 3.5-mile corridor. As I mentioned, it goes from about I-66, goes on the north side of Falls Church, down through East Falls Church, and down to 7 Corners. This graphic on the right shows you what this looks like. In a stylistic kind of way, I'll admit. And we use a couple of different ways to evaluate this corridor. So the whole purpose of this is to look at the mobility effects of BRT, facilitate the public's understanding of BRT, bus rapid transit, and test multiple BRT scenarios. So we use traffic modeling, which is a very standard kind of practice for this kind of analysis. But this is not the only thing we did. We also did public outreach. And I'll go through some of the different outreach activities we went through in this process. But I do want to emphasize we did through both there. And then as this last bullet point emphasizes, this study does not make any recommendations. This is you can consider it like a fact-finding mission. The traffic modeling provides some facts, the public outreach provides some facts, and my job here is to present those facts. And that is the end of my job for this project. Say what these facts are.
I'm sure you have opinions, though.
I have opinions, but you will not be hearing them.
We try.
Next slide, please. So this is a little hard to read in the slide, and honestly, this is also better seen, blown up a little bit. But this is the best kind of way to summarize all the scenarios that we tested. So essentially what we did was we created what's what we call the engineering and planning world, build and no-build scenario. So what that means is a build scenario is like a no-build scenario is a very minimal investment scenario where the very least amount spent to make the corridor work in future conditions without a lot of investment is done. Scenario 1, 2, and 3 are build scenarios where we actually recommend or tested, I should say rather, not recommend, tested different types of bus priority treatments is what we call it. Different types of bus priority investments, infrastructure, policies to try and move bus faster through the corridor. So one thing that's common across all the scenarios, build and no build, is the idea of TSP or transit signal priority. This is something that basically a bus talks to traffic signal and helps the bus move faster through the corridor. So this is something that's assumed throughout, as well as like level boarding where buses can load and unload faster. That's assumed for all scenarios. What's a little bit different is some of the infrastructure treatments. So you'll see in scenario 1, scenario 3 have a little bit of red in some of those lanes. And this is what are called BAT lanes, business access transit lanes, turn lanes, where basically buses and turning vehicles can both use those lanes, and that's what was tested and modeled. So scenario 1 is kind of the all-out maximum kind of scenario, and that's why you're seeing a lot of red there. Scenario 3 has that scaled back a lot because it's kind of a middle scenario, and scenario 2 has no of those BAT lanes. Instead, scenario 2 has what we call Q jumps. So what this does is when a bus comes up to a signal, it gets a special type of signal treatment. It looks a little bit different to your typical traffic signal, and it allows the bus to move ahead of traffic first and skip the traffic, and it gives that priority to the bus. So you might see some of these in Metroway, for example. I was riding Metroway, giving a tour to our NVTC interns a few weeks ago, and you get to see it in action, which is always fun to see. But Metroway has a great example where you can see these Q jumps in person. You can also see red bus lanes in person, slightly different operation we're proposing here, and they have TSP in person, so it's a great way to see it. But essentially, those are 3 build scenarios: a maximum scenario in scenario 1, a minimum scenario in scenario 2, where you just have the Q jumps, and then a moderate scenario in scenario 3. 3 different types of build scenarios. Try and get an understanding of the mix of like what you could potentially do and sort of see what the results are.
Xavier, could you describe for us in public Metroway? What is the?
Oh, sorry. Metroway is the BRT we have right now existing in Alexander and Arlington. So it's opened pretty. I can't even remember the year now. But it was. I usually
Not too long ago.
Not too long ago. Yeah. It's enough to actually see the impact. And if you want to ride BRT in this region, that's where you go. And it is probably a corridor that is pretty similar to what this will look like in the end. It's not as long as this corridor, but it's a lot of mixed bus priority treatments. So if you want to experience what it's going to be like, this corridor will be like in Metro 7, go ride Metroway, because that's what it's going to probably be like. Pretty similar to, and more so than anywhere else in this region. I will, before I continue, I will note that the Metro 7 corridor is a particularly good corridor for bus. We are already above pre-pandemic ridership levels for this corridor as is, and so what these treatments will do, this making this bus priority, will actually, making this full BRT, will actually improve the ridership experience for people who already rely on the system, but also make it better for people, to encourage more people to use the system moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about some fairly technical terms like BAT lanes and Q jumps. These are some graphics. Again, these are a little bit smaller, see the slides up on the screen. These are graphics that kind of demonstrate how they work to help understand. And these graphics are shown to the public as well at public meetings. So this is an example of how a BAT lane works. So you can see the red lanes with buses in them, but you can also see that there are vehicles sitting in those lanes as they make their turning movements. So it's both used by turning vehicles and bus lanes. It doesn't prohibit cars turning into businesses or making right-turn movements. It's just trying to prevent vehicles making the through movement from using those lanes. So we see these in both scenario 1 and scenario 3. Next slide, please. So this is a Q jump, as I mentioned. This is what you can see. Like there's a little signal picture there. So the bus pulls up the traffic signal. You can see there are cars queued there in that traffic signal. The bus gets its own little signal, and it allows them to go ahead of the traffic and get ahead of those cars, so it doesn't sit in that traffic. That's essentially what it does. It's a relatively basic concept, but it's just a nice little way for buses to get ahead of traffic and not sit in traffic. So that's for scenario 2, and there's an example, and we also include one of those in scenario 3. Next slide, please. And then this is also just one additional place in scenario 3, there's a recommendation to have a little turn pocket so that using the right lane there for the back lane doesn't prohibit, doesn't get blocked with left-turning vehicles as well. So just another improvement that was considered there. And there's also an example of signage there of what might be used for that right lane. Buses and right turns only. Again, this is all conceptual. This is just to show how it might work, and is not necessarily a recommendation of what we will suggest will happen. This is just what we tested for each scenario. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's a lot of talking about like the different scenarios, excuse me, what they look like. What we ultimately did, like I said, is we modeled the results from a traffic point of view, traffic modeling, as well as through a public survey. We also had a couple of public meetings that we had presented these results at, as well as provide the survey at. So on the left here, you see the traffic modeling results. The light blue there on the left is scenario 1. The dark green is scenario 2, and the light green is scenario 3. As I mentioned at the beginning of these scenarios, scenario 1 was kind of all out, scenario 2 was the minimal build scenario, and scenario 3 was the no build. All these results that you're going to be seeing here are presented versus the no build. The no build is going to be basically what we will be out there, assuming we don't build the BRT kind of situation. So what you see is kind of what we expected when we went into this. The all-out kind of scenario, scenario 1, has the most travel time reductions for bus, but also has the most impact for all vehicles, so that would be general traffic. And then scenario 2 has the minimal benefits for bus, but also minimal impacts to all traffic. And then scenario 3 is somewhere in the middle. Again, kind of what we expected. So the survey results are summarized on the right there. There was about a 5-minute survey that was presented to both people who would ride the bus, but also in some general locations where people could just like farmers markets, things like that, where the general public can learn about the project. And each of these scenarios, build scenarios that I talked about already, we describe them and ask basically, do you think this will improve the mobility in the corridor like on a scale like I very much agree it will, and I very much agree it would work kind of scenario. We summarize this by finding the difference between the people who agree and the difference between the people who disagree. So what we call is the net agreement. So it's a concept where you get all the people who agree, take away all the people who disagree, and that difference is what we're showing here. It's a way to sort of put 3 different graphs of data in one graph. It's trying to limit how many slides you have to endure on this presentation. So as you can see, scenario 1 had the most overall agreement, net agreement, and scenario 3 had the smallest net agreement. This is just primarily because the disagreement was pretty consistent between all 3 scenarios, and scenario 1 had the most agreement. That's kind of why you see the results that you see. But this kind of summarizes the traffic modeling and the survey results, the fact modeling stuff. I have, I think, 1 or 2 more slides.
Can I ask a question about these slides?
Okay, yeah. Please.
Okay, yeah, so, and I think I asked this before,
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask it again, because actually I'm not really quite remembering, maybe others. Remind me why it is that scenario 1 looks so great except in the afternoon and causes so much trouble for other vehicles, right? That's what that graph is saying, I think, if I'm understanding correctly. And then a new question's occurred to me. Would that maybe end up changing people's behavior, you know? That might be a good thing.
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first because it's easier for me.
Okay.
So one of the things that's not captured in some of these results, and if you want to read the report, it's a hefty 70+ pages.
I'd
the
rather
draft
ask
report
you.
is there. You can dig it into all you want. It's a little, honestly, and I have a couple of engineering degrees, and even for me it's a little bit dry. But essentially, if you want some of the details in there, but there's a nice section in there that talks about some of the traffic that gets displaced through some of this stuff. talk about traffic behavior, that is exactly what you see here. The more stuff you put onto this road to sort of improve the bus performance here, the less inviting it looks for people who are just regularly driving through that corridor. If you're I used to live in Alexandria, and I would always think about King Street and how I hated driving in King Street, so I'd avoid it. And so I always think of that example myself, like when you know the area, you know the places where you want to, seven corners was decided earlier. You know the areas you want to avoid whenever you can as a local driver. And that's a kind of theory that plays out both in research and what is modeled here. So what it assumes is that when there's more build out, you actually have traffic diverting from the area. And generally that is, there's some assumptions around that, and it's basically more work would need to be done about those diversions if that was to be pursued. But that is some of the assumptions the modeling has predicted, that some cars might be diverted because drivers naturally will think it's a more difficult place to drive. There will be some change in travel behavior as the transit performance improves. To answer your first question, essentially there are just some peaking characteristics in the PM that are particularly concentrated right there. It's kind of a result of just what the traffic flow data sort of gave us. We used traffic counts that were, we primarily used 2019 data because of when the project started, but then we did some local traffic counts to vet that data that was collected during the study period, so it was 2022. So we made sure that the numbers made sense. We verified that, and we found that there was that PM, particularly concentrated peak characteristic along that corridor, which is why you see it particularly intense in the PM.
So maybe it's like school letting out or something?
I
mean, it just seems, I'm just, you know, I don't want to take up too much time, but.
Yeah, the peak period is after when schools typically let out. It's, I think it's just a popular PM commute corridor. I don't have a lot of insight into that, unfortunately, but if scenario one is ultimately what's decided, I think that's something that could definitely be further explored.
Yeah, it might get less popular. Thank you. Thanks for the explanation.
Next slide, please. So talking about the public feedback, we were fairly, we did try a few different methods getting out there. Some of the pictures you see on the right here from our last public meeting we had, which was in the library at Falls Church, which was a really good event, I thought. It was fairly well attended. We had bus stop chats, pop-up events in public places like farmers markets, 2 public meetings, and the survey as well as a variety of public outreach approach. About 60% of respondents agreed that improving bus speed and reliability was a high priority in the region, which is encouraging for this kind of project. And some of the comments noted that transit service would serve as a catalyst for future growth, and that's always encouraging to see again, because BRT and these kind of infrastructure improvements are really good, historically shown for economic development and other drivers of growth in the region. And then there were some concerns noted in the survey as well. We had some open-ended questions, and so this just summarizes some of them. So increased traffic, unsurprising, financial feasibility, potential traffic diversions, which I talked a little bit about, and some of the impacts of small town feel and bicycle safety. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last content slide before we retouch again on what the action is this evening. So right now where we are is we are working with Falls Church to determine the scenario that will be advanced. This is not NVTC's decision to make. Though at the PAC, some people were encouraging me to voice my opinion, but this is not our decision to make. This is City Falls Church decision. This is why we work with the community of City Falls Church, because their voice is we want to hear. It's their choice, and it's the City Council who's voicing that choice. Also this fall, NVTC staff will be meeting with jurisdictional leadership regarding the strategic implementation plan. Kate mentioned that earlier, and that is something that is going to be ongoing. So you'll be hearing more about that at a later time, but right now we're meeting jurisdictional staff about some of those recommendations. Over the winter, we're releasing the RFP, the request for proposal for phase 4.2, that's 7 corners to Alexandria. And we'll be seeking approval of the strategic implementation plan by the Commission, you all, as well as the affected councils and boards, so cities of Alexandria and Falls Church and the counties of Arlington and Fairfax. And then as we move into the spring, we hopefully will award the contract for phase 4-2 analysis. And of course, we'll have ongoing engagement throughout with all our key jurisdictional partners, as well as funding and governance partners, DOPT, FDA, BDOT, COG, MBTA. There's a lot of players in this project, a lot of jurisdictions, there's a lot going on. And it makes the project, like I said at the beginning, really particularly useful for this region because it is such a cross-cutting project. It's got a really valuable contribution to this region. It's why it has such high ridership. But it also comes with its own challenges, and that's partly what makes transportation planning fun. Next slide, please. So again, a reminder, this is the action this evening to accept the findings of the Vision Road 7 VRT Phase 4-1 mobility study. There are no recommendations, it's just to accept the findings that I brought to you this evening. In case you weren't aware, there are no recommendations.
Good, yes, wonderful. Well, first of all, let me just thank you so much, Xavier. I hope the project manager has your level of both expertise and enthusiasm.
I was part of this person's interview panel, and I am cautiously optimistic that this will be probably may even exceed my
Oh, no. I'm not sure that's possible.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much and the team who worked on this with you. And I believe, again, want to mention not only the caveat that there's no decision, that it will be up to the council on that, but that part of this work and the fact, I believe that we're able to hire this individual, which I think is so helpful, understanding that there's a full alphabet of jurisdictions and partners involved, is that we did receive the $2 million earmark from federal funders. And so very excited to have that for this project and to understand especially the regional significance of this work. So thank you so much for moving us along. I don't have a question. One more comment is that it was very nice to see them. Definitely were out in the community. I did not want to sway the survey, so I did not respond at the farmers market, but it was very good to see your team out there and taking feedback, and I do see Delegate Simon in this photo, so hopefully he responded.
That's why I chose that photo.
I figured. I'm sure he tried to get more info out of you too. I have an opinion, but I'm sure you were strong enough to say no. So thank you so much, and just very excited to see this moving along, and appreciate the fall, winter, and spring points here as we continue through phase 4. And I think you skipped through a few until we get to the construction, but that getting to the next phases and continuing that through this transition and our board transition this year, I think is very helpful, so thank you. I don't have a specific question yet, so I'll turn it over to Mr. DeFronti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also am mindful that Mr. Snyder may have thoughts. I guess I wanted to try to clarify a little bit, not to ask to get your opinion, but to understand what we're doing here, because the summary in the packet has study findings, and then I sort of looked to try and identify where there were findings of fact and where there were descriptions. And then I looked at the report, and I feel like there's a page in the executive summary and then the conclusions that feel more comfortable for me as findings. Is that kind of what and then there's a bunch of tables which are also findings, but the executive summary and the last page of the conclusions are very carefully crafted to say you might get a percentage increase, but it would cost more, and am I in the ballpark of what we would actually be accepting as findings, even though we are essentially accepting the full report?
Yeah, so I think the way to craft this is that you're accepting the work that's been done for this and acknowledging that, everyone sitting around this table here knows that making decisions around transportation is not just about traffic models, and it's not just, and that's what heavily that report is about. And so there's a lot of acknowledgements. I'm not saying this is what might be predicted based on the inputs that go into this model. And I always like the expression, all models are wrong, some models are useful. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind with some of these things, that this is what, using the data we have, this is what we might predict might be the outcome of this. But this is not everything that you should be considering in making model for transportation. And this is why I don't envy Mr. Snyder and his colleagues in making this decision, because there's a lot of inputs that go into this. The survey is one of those things. The other ways that constituents can make their voices heard. So this is just acknowledging that the work that NVTC has done, that is all we're asking for you to accept. Acknowledging that there is other stuff that could be considered that is outside of the scope of what we have done, and that you are not necessarily needing to make a stand on like where you sit on your own as a commissioners. You do not necessarily need to say where you sit with which one you prefer as well. This is again down to this Snyder's colleagues, and it's just this is what we've done.
Sure. So the Kittleson and Associates full report is part of what you would describe as NVTC's overall work?
Yes.
Okay.
They are our consultants, and we encourage them with certain assumptions and certain things like that, and they provided an NVTC product. We just paid them for this product.
Great. Well, when I like findings of fact, they're words of God, and when I don't, they're policy opinions. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Snyder.
Sure. Well, thank you, and thank everyone involved for a significant amount of work, analysis, information gathering. It's much appreciated for sure, and will help a lot. I want to go to slide 9. That's the one where I think it's already been discussed. I think that's as soon as we get it up on the screen. Yeah. Right, that one. I think we really ought to go back and look at the data and the assumptions there. And time of day makes a huge difference. I know that corridor is very crowded for probably an hour every morning and 2 hours every evening. And the rest of the time, the travel time is much more rapid than would be the case. So at the very least, there needs some explanation there, because if I'm just looking at this, I would say, now, let me get this right. We're going to put a few buses on there, and my travel time is going to get worse. And so I think that at least the assumptions here ought to be spelled out more clearly. And I think there's also the assumption that we're not going to be taking any traffic off of 7 as a result of this bus service. And one of the things we're trying to do is get people out of their cars and into the buses. So if this chart is presented in the future and in the report, it needs a lot of explanation, because taken out of context, it creates a very different story than I think what the reality would be.
So to add,
Go ahead.
to respond to that, this, what's presented in the slides here, you have 10 slides for a 70-page report, and I tried to be very, very brief. There is a lot more context, a lot more explanation about how this works, and all the assumptions and why they were made in the report. I will also note that the AM and PM here, they are only showing peak-to-the-peak hour periods. So you are seeing the worst of the AM, the worst of the PM for this corridor. That's why we chose those, because there is a limited amount of time we can use for modeling for our budget, and so we only chose the worst hour in the afternoon, the lowest hour in the morning. All those assumptions, I can't remember quite from my head what it was. It's all in the draft report, but that's why these kinds of things are typically chosen for modeling, because we only have finite funds, and so we focus on the worst time periods, and that's what we've done here, and that's really spelled out in the report. Because of the nature of the presentation, I was very brief with what I showed and how I described the analysis, but there's a lot more in depth in the report.
Okay. Then perhaps the report answers my questions, but I hope they are answered, because again, taken out of context, this tells a very different story than I think the reality is.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a clarification? Just to understand, is the chart showing that the travel time goes down? Or, so it's, though a negative means
So
that it's faster or slower?
Yeah.
So this is showing that things are faster.
Travel time is much faster.
Thank you. I think that might,
What's that again? I'm sorry. Could you?
so the chart that is on the left side of
Right.
page
That's the one I'll
9,
focus on. Yeah.
the charts that go down below negative, those are actually showing time, speed getting faster.
Yes.
So the travel time has gone down. So those are faster scenarios.
The only one that's going up is the PM
And
scenario.
it needs to be
one.
explained that that's a very limited period of time.
Sure.
And other explanations, because again, PM is half a day, right, to most people. So you're telling, and again, I just want to make sure that the presentation does not unnecessarily create confusion and wrong interpretations on its face. So that chart in particular, if you could look at it again in the report, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, this chart isn't in the report because I was summarizing multiple things from the report. The report, it's very explicit for peak hour, and we can adjust it for the online presentation, but the report is pretty sound. It's pretty strong with what it means by peak hour, and I'm pretty intense when it comes about like detail, and so I made sure that was spelled out throughout, because if I'm not sure, then no one else is going to be sure, because I'm the project manager. So I'm always making sure those details are tight, and in the report it's tight. This is, I should have put peak hour on that slide, and we'll adjust that when we, for putting online, but it is just the peak hour for the AM.
But there's details.
Yeah, very helpful, thanks.
Yeah, so I can't remember what page in the report it was. I'm going through it now, but perhaps, and I appreciate that. I think here for our commission, we try to keep it very brief. But perhaps as you go through, if you could send back out to us.
Page numbers, yeah.
Page numbers, and maybe if we have a, I don't know, one pager or something, a summary that maybe has slightly more detail, especially being out in the community and like the council gets questions from it, something that.
The executive summary, we managed to shrink down to 3 pages. One of those being that demonstration of the 4 different scenarios. So that is a shrunk down version that tries to talk about what the analysis does while not getting too in the weeds. It's kind of a compromise between this presentation and the report. So it's around 2 pages of content. Hopefully that's somewhat digestible. That was definitely, unfortunately this is relatively technical kind of like exercise, and so there was a lot of trouble trying to shrink this down. But we'll see if we can get some cliff notes out.
Yeah, and I think especially the, because I don't know that the executive summary has visuals other than that one main one with the roads on it.
Yeah, we took them out trying to make it shorter.
Right.
Again, trying to keep it nice and very, very tight.
So I think to the point, if you're able to create maybe 1 or 2 additional visuals,
Yep.
especially most of the public is visual, I think you have that in here,
Yep.
just helping us communicate it out. That's
No
the only
worries.
thing I think, if I'm hearing Mr. Shelley correctly. I'm not sure, I did not read every word of this report, and I expect the public to, but appreciate that we can help summarize and share that. Because it is, people will react to it. Yes, Ms. Bagley.
Thank you, Chair. I was with you. This is my second time to this presentation, and one question that I didn't ask last time that occurred to me tonight is I'm wondering if you could speak to not so much changes in travel time, but did the study also evaluate sort of the reliability improvements? I know with that broad presentation y'all did earlier this year on like BRT generally and why we like it, one of those things was the reliability factor. And I'm just curious, besides like actual speed of service, did either of these scenarios, were they studied for what they would do in terms of the reliability of arrival departure times for the users?
So from what so it wasn't an explicit goal. I think it was captured in some ways because you talk about like when you model these things, you have a result that says X amount of time, and it's like an average of the standard deviation. Mm-hmm. The standard deviation is your measure of reliability. So some of that is captured in there, but it wasn't an explicit goal. But I would have to double check and get back to you what we actually say in there about reliability. I can't remember quite off the top of my head what it said in that.
Because I think that's something we hear frequently. It's about frequency and also reliability. And so if there's a way to boil that down into something, I appreciate how like the speed is going to inherently increase reliability. But if there is some way to turn that into a percentage improvement on reliable arrival times, I think that might be helpful for also gaining, community support for them. So many people say, I got there and the bus had already left, or I got there and I waited 12 minutes longer. It would be a nice data point in support, I would hope.
And sorry, I assumed that compared to the current two-way bus,
I would think compared to no build, like the no build scenario versus.
Yeah, so all these results are compared to no build. So
Okay.
anything we have would be, like, anything we would have in the report of reliability would be talking about no build.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments? Goodness, well, the report is there, if anyone maybe is having trouble sleeping at night, to get into engineering talk. Thank you so much, we really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get to meet the even more enthusiastic Xavier at our next meeting. And really appreciate the work and the fact that as NVTC, with some of the, especially the smaller jurisdictions that are part of this, that you're able to provide the support as they make the final decision on the scenarios. Okay, well, thank you so much. Appreciate that, Xavier. And excellent questions. I lost my place again.
We need a motion to.
So we do have to have the endorsements at this time. And so do I have a motion to endorse the study?
So moved.
So move the second, Ms. Bagley. Any further discussion? Oh, there's Takis. Any further discussion? All right, let me go ahead and start with you, Takis. Aye, excellent. He's the only one online right now? Okay, wonderful. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Do we have Mr. Brewer?
She must not be.
Okay, I don't believe so. Okay, so wonderful, that motion passes. Thank you, and appreciate everyone's patience with our wonderful technology this evening. So excellent work as we continue through that BRC 7 project. And now we're moving on to commuter choice. We do have a presentation tonight for the call for project. I am happy to introduce our commuter choice senior program analyst, Adam Hager, to give a presentation on the I-66 commuter choice call for projects for FY 25-26. No action is needed tonight, but it was a little teaser for everyone, as well as what we all love to hear is the amount of funding that's going on for this round. So the floor is yours, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight we have a quick recap of the Community Choice Program and update on the FY 25-26 calls and projects. So first, a little bit about the program. Community Choice, of course, is our grant program that invests a portion of toll revenues from I-66 and I-395-95 to transit and other transportation improvements that benefit toll payers by moving more people more efficiently through the corridors and expanding options for commuters. The I-66 program is administered solely by us at NVTC and has been around since 2017. We do have long-term funding agreements with the Commonwealth that spell out the funding for both corridors. For I-66, we typically see about $30 million per 2-year cycle, and that is comprised inside the Beltway toll revenues and outside the Beltway concessionaire funding. Next slide. This year we are expecting at least $40 million available for new projects, which is the largest amount available in the I-66 round to date, so we are very excited about that. Of that amount, we're anticipating that up to about 50% can be used for transit operations. Our agreement with the Commonwealth does stipulate no more than 50% of revenues transferred to NVTC over a 9-year period can be used to support transit operations. Thankfully, we have stayed well below that threshold in recent funding rounds, which does give us a little bit more flexibility this time around. During its July meeting, the Program Advisory Committee requested the total amount of revenue available for this funding round, and we are continuing to work with our Commonwealth partners on toll revenue projections for the forthcoming fiscal years. And we will have a firmer estimate before the Commission opens the call for projects next month. But for now, we are comfortable advertising at least $40 million figure. A couple other items of note for this round. We are not proposing any major changes to program policy, but there are a few small clarifications that we're making in our recipient handbook, things like a couple of updates to the application form and clarifying how we score certain measures, that type of thing. The only change in how we administer the program, which we did review with the PAC in July, is we are looking to bump up the application window by a month to open the call for projects in October rather than November. So this will give us a little bit more time and flexibility with program development in the spring. So speaking of that call for projects process, as far as the next few months go, we will hold a call for projects webinar on the 27th of this month for applicant staff, where we will go over project eligibility and the application form. And then next month, we'll be back to ask the commission to open the call for projects. And we'll have one-on-one workshops with eligible applicants to discuss their project ideas and review the application materials in mid-October. Applications will be due in December prior to the holidays on the 18th. And next slide. For program development in the spring, just a couple quick highlights of the schedule. Once the application window closes, we begin our program development process that concludes in June with approval of program of projects. In January, we will get started by reviewing all submitted applications for eligibility, working with the RTC, and we'll notify any applicants with ineligible projects. The key component that we look for here is whether a project will benefit toll payers. Most importantly, does it move more people through the I-66 inside the Beltway corridor? Then we'll switch gears and we will score all eligible applications using the same technical evaluation process as this past year for I-395 commuter choice. There's a heavy emphasis on technical merits and things like person throughput, travel time savings, transportation connections, accessibility, and equity. And then there's also cost effectiveness and applicant preference. In April, we'll open a 1-month public comment period where the public can provide input on all eligible applications. We also expect to be packaging in April to consider and endorse a draft program of projects for the full commission to consider in May. So in May, we will brief the commission on that packed endorsed program of projects and close public comment. And we will also work with the RPT to determine how we might engage the CTB and or its Rail and Transit Subcommittee for a briefing. In June, the commission will act to adopt the program and refer it to the CTB, which will approve the projects as part of the 6-year improvement program adoption. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the call for projects.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate that. And the question that came up during the executive committee is just 40 million. Sounds wonderful. Could you remind us the past two calls for action for programs, what the totals were there?
Sure. So this year, that $40 million, we were relatively conservative with total revenue projections in the past couple funding rounds. So of course, with the last round, right in the middle of the pandemic, we advertised $12 million available this time about 2 years ago and ended up approving a $15 million program, just over $15 million. In the I-66, what we called at the time round 4, so this was for the FY 21-22 period, we ended up approving effectively a 2-tier program where we were comfortable with the amount of toll revenue we had in the bank effectively at the time for about $4 million for an initial program and then about 5 and some change for a supplemental program, making out just over $9 million in the prior program. So we have been relatively conservative with projections and everything in the last couple rounds. That does allow us to have a more flush program this time around.
That's one. And I guess too that we're saying at least 40 million, so it could also go higher.
That's what we're advertising right now. So there's still a couple of numbers that we'd like to crunch, and we'll come back with a firmer estimate next month before the commission takes action to
And we don't estimate it'll go below that.
It will not go below that.
Okay, excellent. Wonderful. Well, I think that's wonderful news for those of us that FCBOT still in the house. But I think wonderful to see, and I think some of us have been paying into those toll revenues recently, so we know that traffic is back out there. Any additional questions or comments for Adam? All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure our staff will be looking at that and preparing some proposals.
Sure.
Next up, we do have, my apologies, the report of our Legislative and Policy Committee. Our Chair of Legislative and Policy is not able to join us.
He's not able to join us. So I'm pinch hitting again.
So is it Kate again?
It will be.
All right.
It will
So Kate got the short straw today. She was giving an update on the August 31st Legislative and Policy Committee meeting and introducing key initiatives. And I don't know, is Amy also available today?
So we do hope so. As I mentioned, the weather's been tough, so I don't know if she's been able to maintain a connection, but I'll keep my eyes open. for that, but hopefully by the end of this, if there are any questions, I can at least relay them back to her. Of course, we do also have Senator Eben if it's.
I'm here.
Oh, you are here, wonderful.
He's here.
It is
Wonderful.
just a thrill
Hi,
to see.
Amy,
Thank you.
And Adam's here too. Excellent. You guys just came back from short session, so we're happy to hear a little bit more. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. So indeed, the Legislative and Policy Committee met last Thursday to really dive into scoping out our 2024 legislative and policy agenda. And so Amy was able to give us an update on the General Assembly. Obviously, we have a unique this year with General Assembly elections, with the amount of changeover in the General Assembly is going to be as many as 55 new members of the House and Senate coming in this January. So obviously, with that many retirements among General Assembly members and all the new districting, we were doing a lot of things behind the scenes to reach out and foster relationships with many of those elected officials who may be finding themselves in leadership roles. So that's something that she and I and her team have been doing. We also discussed, as I mentioned, the 2024 legislative and policy agenda, just putting some ideas out for the committee to consider. As I mentioned, that's going to be coming back to this body for November for discussion for enactment in December. And so just as a reminder, our legislative agenda provides high-level guidance so that we can work with the General Assembly or the U.S. Congress on a number of policy issues of priority to the Commission. And so in particular, we did look at specifically, sort of long-term sustainable funding for our transit systems, including WMATA. Obviously, those are some things that we're going to be refining over the coming weeks and months. We also included on the federal side is sort of recognizing the need or sort of the role of federal agencies in public transit and their support of operations of public transit. We actually did last year in our legislative agenda, spoke to return to work that can be supportive of the way in which our transit systems operate. Anticipate similar types of themes this year in the legislative agenda. And again, we are continuing to refine. The next legislative policy committee meeting will be, again, the one that's joint with the WMATA committee later in October. So we'll keep working those things. Couple other highlights, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about our legislative forum. As wonderful Senator Eben was a part of that earlier this week. The General Assembly did finally pass our budget amendments. And so in the transportation space, I know there's a lot of activities in other budget areas, but there actually really was nothing of significance in the transportation space. However, one of the issues that we were concerned about that was in there related to what was called the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, which would actually have taken funding away from the Commonwealth Transportation Fund for special projects that's determined by the governor. That was actually taken off and was not included in the budget amendments. That would have, if you look at the House and Senate version, was a difference between 200 or 100 million gone from the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. That would have actually affected Virginia Mass Transit Fund by about 22.5 million. So we are happy that that was not in there. And finally, as I just go through my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything, we do have, and I mentioned it earlier, our joint legislative forums Friday, December 1st at 8:30 a.m. at George Mason University's Arlington campus. Again, new date, new location. We definitely do not want people accidentally heading down to Springfield because we will not be there. And we are really excited to see.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
But we actually are making it a metro and transit friendly location where it is. And we actually just put the save the dates were sent out yesterday, and we've already had 70 RSVPs. So we expect a really popular event this year. And so I'm happy to answer your questions as well as, of course, Amy.
Excellent. Amy, do you want to add anything before we do questions?
No, I think Kate covered it all, actually.
All right, you're hired, Kate. Good, wonderful. And so I guess that's our update for both of those. Yes, Mr. Staley.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a quick note, because I don't know the next time I'll get to share it all with you. One of the most interesting meetings I was at with transportation involved an NVTA discussion about autonomous vehicles. And I really think that's an area that this region, if you look at bus rapid transit and all the jurisdictions, we should start paying some attention to as to what does it mean, in particular last mile aerial delivery, and what that could mean for our roadways, the types of cars we're moving through, how we would handle that conversation. So I think an annual legislative forum with some focus on that conversation would be very, very valuable. I think about it, the new vehicles we all purchase have a bit of autonomy in them, but not complete autonomous, and the types of autonomy we may see down the road, including larger trucks and how they would deliver. If you think of a grocery store, having a truck that is autonomous delivering and coming in our roads are going to be here sooner than later. And I think if we're looking 6 years out, having that conversation now may be helpful. Because we're great partners in the region. We actually invited MITRE to be part of that conversation. They brought an autonomous vehicle to City Hall, but they couldn't drive it to City Hall because it was not legal to drive from where they were at to where we were because of the number of roads and types of roads that we get on. So those type of interjurisdictional opportunities, I think, are worth pursuing in the legislative forums. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up MITRE. I was there for their economic forum yesterday, a great partner here in our region for some thoughts. And I know we have a little bit of experience with some of those autonomous vehicles, so much to look ahead. So to that, I believe at this point, we will turn it over to our partners at the RE. Am I skipping something? No. The RE it is, and I do see Mr. Felton, nice, I was gonna say nice and tan, at the end of summer. I know he probably rode the train every
He's always
Friday.
tan.
Always tan, and the beard's looking a little long. He's getting ready for Santa train. But we do have him, as well as Mr. Schofield, for a brief to the Commission on the BRE FY 2025, if you can imagine, key budget issues.
Great.
It's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commission members. Good evening. Let me just, before we shift over to Mark, I just wanted to just give a brief update on service performance. Both the months of July and August has not been our best. We had a couple of significant operational issues, one of which being in the month of July, there was a derailment of an Amtrak train at the Washington Union Terminal that basically not only shut down our operation, or half of an AM operation, but we had several canceled trains over several days. And of course, that also affected ridership for the month of July. And there were several other issues, if you will, with primarily with Amtrak, but to some degree, some of our other host railroads. Month of August got a little bit better, but not much better. We did have an incident with one of our host railroads where they effectively had a system-wide shutdown that basically stopped all trains, literally dead in their tracks for several hours. We've also, for the first time in over a decade, been dealing with heat orders on the Norfolk Southern line, which is something that we don't normally deal with. So, and that was the last week of July, and of course this week in August. So all of that to say, system performance was well below our target. Of course, some of the countermeasures put in place, of course, are for the safety of our passengers, i.e., with heat orders, it's slowing trains down. So in the event that we have some kink rail, we have time to react to that. So all of that to say, and then of course, ridership was, with the exception of July, where I mentioned we had some canceled trains, continued to very slowly, agonizingly, continue to increase even through the month of August. So the month of September, we've already had a couple of bad days, if you will, as well. But nonetheless, that continues to be a focus of ours, and we are in constant contact with our host railroads, our partners and stuff on a daily basis. Working with them as much as we can to work through some of those issues. So, and then of course in your package you have our CEO report. Albeit, I believe, yeah, we put one out for the month of August as well. So we didn't have any operations board meeting, but we do have a report. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn to Mark Schofield. He'll give you a precursor, if you will, as we do every September for the commissions on basically our budget process and sort of where we're headed, some key points to that. So with that, Mr. Schofield.
Thank you, Rich. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners, just to remind you of what the schedule is for the VRE budget and how it works with the commissions. We kicked the process off in July, talking to the operations board about what we call the key budget issues that we see coming up. We will be going to the operations board next week to present the preliminary budget. That means we will be back here with you all in October to discuss that preliminary budget. We will continue to work through the fall, present the recommended budget to the operations board in December, and then we'll be back here with you all again in January, requesting your approval. We have the information in your packet there about what a number of the key budget issues were that we talked about. I just want to highlight 3 of them, and then I'd be happy to either take questions, or if you have some guidance that you'd like us to take back as we work on the budget, that would be great too. The first and probably the most interesting is that we have gotten very positive feedback in discussions both with the operations board and with our partners at Keolis and those railroads about taking the first real big step towards what I would call the promise of TRV and introducing weekend VRE service. So we are working right now on how can we get the most bang for our buck, but put out VRE service on Saturdays in the upcoming fiscal year. So we'll be working on that all through the fall, really determining how much we think that's going to cost, but we look forward to bringing that to the operations board and to you all as a part of the process. Number 2 is what are we going to charge the passengers to ride VRE? It will have been 5 years since we had any changes to the fares because of the interruption due to the pandemic. Because of inflation that we've had over that period, the purchasing power of what the passengers pay has dropped by almost 20%. I don't think we're going to have a 20% increase in the fares, but we do need to sort of get back on the horse of making sure that we have an equitable way to pay for the cost of VRE, while also not turning off the customers, not jacking it up too high. So we'll be having that discussion. We will be asking the operations board for authorization to have public hearings, public outreach, to go out to the public to talk about the budget and to talk specifically about the fare changes that we're looking at. And then the third item I would say is just sort of the classic issue of budgeting. Once we get the passenger revenue, how do we balance, again, in an equitable way, the money that comes out of the jurisdictions, the money that we'll be getting newly this year from the dedicated piece of the MTF at the state level, and then how do we spend out the remaining pandemic relief money that we have, in the most sensible way, to make it last as long as possible. Obviously, we have other issues to talk about, staffing and diesel and things like that, but I think the real sort of policy issues are those big 3 that I just mentioned. So we'll be happy to, like I said, answer questions now, or we can just wait and come back and after.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. And before I turn to our commissioners, just turning to operations board chair, Mr. Walkinshaw.
I think Rich and Mark laid it out well. I mean, one thing in terms of the service issues we had over the summer, I mean, it highlights the challenge that we're in that literally nothing Rich talked about is VRE's fault or in VRE's control. So, we're reacting to the weather, obviously, and then to issues that come up with the host railroads or our other partners. And I want to I think Rich and the VRE team have done a really amazing job in communicating with our riders through that. Obviously, we're frustrated. A lot of my constituents were frustrated, and it's a fine balance between expressing empathy with the situation that they're in, but also communicating why things are happening, whether it's weather or an Amtrak issue. So I thought they did a really great job of that. In terms of the budget, I think it is really exciting, and I've been pressing the board hard and the team hard for us to accelerate the weekend service. I think it is really important for us as a system, as we're still trying to figure out the right service mix that's gonna bring in the new riders we know that we need to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. And the sooner we can learn how excited people are about Saturday service, the better we will be able to put that puzzle together. I think anecdotally with the Free Friday service that we offered throughout the summer, we saw a lot of kind of non-traditional VRE riders. People taking their kids downtown and school groups riding VRE. So there absolutely is a market out there for people who would love to use VRE to get around the region outside of the Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. schedule. But we don't know how much until the trains are actually running on Saturday. So I'm excited about that. And I'll also just note in terms of the jurisdictional subsidy conversation, we significantly reduced the amount we ask jurisdictions to contribute to the operation of VRE during the pandemic. And we've been kind of slowly each year returning to the pre-pandemic subsidy level from the jurisdictions. And what I'm hopeful we'll do this year is get back to that pre-pandemic jurisdictional subsidy level, which had we adjusted for inflation would be significantly more. So we're asking less of, I think, we're likely to ask less of the jurisdictions than we would have even had the pandemic never happened, because we're still, thanks to Mark's work, in a very strong financial situation at VRE. So we're not coming to you all and asking for a lot more money to keep the system going, because we're in a good place for the time being.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, and I would say, as one potential Saturday rider, I think it is very exciting. Due to illness, we weren't able to take advantage of the Friday, so I was actually going to ask how that went. I know you all are very cautious and looking at kind of the boom situation that you're seeing, but I think between the safety and the fact that what is within VRE's control, I really appreciate also that the communication. We do not hear a lot from that in our office. It's good to hear that has gone well, but I think the exciting possibility, especially thinking those of us who did not grow up in a time when there was VRE, and the possibility of bringing some of these new younger riders and families onto VRE on weekends for free. But I guess the Friday ridership was a good test, the Free Fridays.
Yes, and I mean, we're still gathering, some information and stuff. I mean, we've anecdotally, we were talking, myself and a couple other staff members were actually on the platform talking to a group of riders that had it not been, again, for a free fare opportunity, if you will. And again, part of the mindset is, figuring out how to ride VRE and take that fare impediment away, and so they can just focus on, what station to ride from, timing and stuff like that. They've set up VRE mobile accounts. They've purchased, 10 trip tickets and stuff, and they're not commuters. They're, just periodic or random riders or whatever. But so there's a lot of examples like that where we pull those into Chair Walkinshaw's comment. So, but we're still analyzing some things. We want to see, this will be something that we continue to work on for the next several weeks, just to get, what was that overall impact from that fare-free opportunity.
Wonderful. And just to clarify on timing, it's our October meeting most likely where we'll have additional information, or in the next October or November?
It would be December.
December.
Oh, December.
Well, just trying to do the.
I mean, we will be coming, the action that we'll ask the operations board next week will be to recommend the preliminary budget to you all.
So it should be October.
We will ask you all to take that and discuss it with your own jurisdictions. So I think we will be back here next month. We can discuss as much or as little as you want about the details of it.
Wonderful. Excellent. Yes, I see Ms. Bagley, and then I think, Ms. Bagley, go ahead.
I just wanted to take a moment to shout out the Tour de VRE, which is happening on October 13th. It's, we'll have another meeting before then, but just right before it. So I did last year. It's a bike ride that basically tracks the service of VRE. It raises some money for some breast cancer research, but it was a lot of fun. It was very inclusive of all skill levels, bicycling abilities. There was even a group on what is it called? Tandem.
Okay.
So it's October 13th. You can register on the website, on the VRE site. Is there some information there, do you think?
Yes, I believe it's there. We've been pushing that information out.
Yeah.
And we will be continuous to push that out as well.
Yeah, but I had a lot of fun last year and hope to participate again this
And I
year.
heard all skill levels, so.
All skill levels.
Excellent.
I think there was even an e-bike that joined in along with, so.
Oh, that's clever.
You can be highly recommended
Yeah.
for the casual bicycle.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm remiss if I didn't mention this. The week of September 18th is National Rail Safety Month. And of course, every year VRE participates in many different ways. And so this year we do have two target areas. One is we're going to do various grade crossing blitzes across the different jurisdictions. We've done this in the past. We reach out to various jurisdictions. Local law enforcement helps us out. We get our host railroads out there and we basically stage ourselves safely at grade crossings, and we hand out information. And it's information about safely working or safely navigating rail grade crossings and stuff like that. The second focus is we want to reach folks on or about the time they start to learn how to read. So we have actually printed up hard copy or hardbound some children's books that we're trying to get distributed to, I believe, about 50 libraries in the region, and try to coordinate that potentially with some story hours or something like that. Really, sort of reach down into that population. So I did want to mention that. So if you hear something in your own jurisdictions about assisting with that, that's a big deal for all of us. One metric that just continues, I think, nationally to haunt us, if you will, is the fact that every 3 hours, somebody is hit by a train at a grade crossing or within the right-of-way, either a person or a vehicle or whatever, and we'd like to collectively work to change that. Fortunately, in the VRE service area, relative to other similar operations, we don't have that many grade crossings, but obviously one incident is too much. So our staff is going to be out that week very heavy in the region, in our community, promoting rail safety. So
Absolutely.
that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I thought you were going to mention schools, libraries, good point, and then also please share with us and if we can support.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes,
One
Commissioner
question,
Darby.
yeah, thank you. Great to hear the report. And I love the Saturday idea. I had a question about, you said because of the delays, you were going to work with your partners, and it's kind of out of your control. So how are you working with? I mean, do they need new? Is it new track? I mean, give me some example. I'm just curious. What are some things we could actually do?
Yeah. So for example, one of the easiest is like with heat orders on Norfolk Southern. So when they
Maybe just tell people Norfolk Southern is which line?
The Manassas line. Okay. So what we do is they inform us they're going to initiate the heat orders. We know we're going to have.
And that means slowing down or
slow.
something?
I'm just going to say that means. By definition, that means we're going to have to slow our trains down to 25 miles an hour. We do have some trains on the Manassas line that are what we consider reverse flow trains. So as soon as they reach the end of the line, they effectively not physically turn around, but go back the other direction. And we know that they're going to be late, right? And they're going to just contribute to further congestion or whatever. So we work with them. We go ahead, like in that case, we would cancel those, or we did cancel some of those reverse flow trains, and of course communicate that out to folks. So we work that's more on the operational side. When it comes to, for example, with Amtrak at Washington Union Terminal, we're currently working on, they do need to accelerate, and they've acknowledged they need to accelerate some, some higher level maintenance there. And so we're working with them right now on things such as not necessarily canceling trains, but rerouting our trains away from those affected areas, which means bringing, for example, our crews on duty a little bit earlier so they can navigate through that. So those are ways that we can help in terms of, funding. I mean, we already contribute, if you will, to those capital maintenance programs and stuff. So it's really about just having that dialogue on a daily basis. And I have to say, our host railroads, in addition to VRE, it's about the passenger. What can we do? And can we, if we have to make some temporary adjustments, get that information out sooner rather than later, so people can also make adjustments in their ways.
So it's a lot of it's communication.
A lot of it's just communicating and collaborating.
Thank you. Yeah, and one last question, if I might, real quick. So the heat slows the trains down. Are all trains like that everywhere? I mean, I know that heat's an issue with trains, but other places in the world, is it all the same? Or could we do better? Or?
Different operations handle that. Well, yeah.
So the answer sort of is yes.
Yes,
it's pretty much the same.
There's some level of that, but of course, Norfolk Southern or the Manassas line handles those differently than CSX or our Fredericksburg line.
Same conditions, but just different approach.
Different approach.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thank you. Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments on VRE? Well, thank you both so much for joining us, for being here tonight, and looks like we'll see you in October as well. Absolutely. So we are now, I believe, Kate's official report.
Almost.
Almost.
So I actually did, we do have the DRPT report, and Jen has some audio problems, so there's two things that she wanted me to remind folks, well, I guess three. First one is their written report is in our materials, but she wanted to mention that the Commonwealth Transportation Board, as well as the Governor's Transportation Conference, will be in Crystal City in October. And so she wanted to point attention to that because those activities are going on there. And I need to confirm that date, but I want to say it's right within the middle of October.
So as soon as we have that, we'll share that out.
Yep. So we actually, those dates are actually included in her materials here. So that's one thing I want to pass on. And then, Madam Chair, if indulged, I can just do my final report. So indeed, we do actually have a lot of things reported in our monthly newsletter because it's actually everything we've done over the summer. It really was a summer of a lot of ribbon cuttings and celebrations. A number of our commuter choice funded projects were celebrated, or we also recognized, we were down at the event of the opening of the FredEx extension, which plays into our commuter choice program for the 395-95 corridor. So there's lots of great stuff. Even highlighted some of our individual jurisdictions and the great things they're doing. I also, of course, have included in the materials our financial reports, and Scott's here to answer any questions. And I would be remiss, although I know she's not here, to congratulate our own Brittany Sumpner. She has come and done presentations to the staff. She's our Grants and Compliance Program Manager, and so she was actually selected to be a part of the first Virginia Transit Association Leadership Institute. And so that's a one-year leadership program that VTA is putting on this year for the first time ever. She's going to be joining transit professionals from around the Commonwealth to do basically a wonderful year to be able to train and become even a better leader. We talked a lot about dates. And so I know Rhonda's going to do an amazing job at getting all these dates out here. But again, Thursday, September 21st, program advisory committees at 4, WMATA committees at 6 upstairs. Thursday, October 19th, which actually is in the middle of all that Governor's Transportation Conference, is going to be quite a week. That's our joint legislative and policy committee as well as the WMATA committee, and that's at 6 p.m. upstairs. And our next commission meeting is on October 5th, where we will have the executive committee meet upstairs prior. And then, of course, we'll all be down here at 7 o'clock. So, Madam Chair, that is it.
Thank you, and I know he's not here tonight,
Oh, yes, definitely do the shout out.
and but shout out, we'll do it in person, next week, Paul Smedberg, who will be honored, I believe, also in October at the APTA, Annual Awards.
Yes.
And I believe Kate will have the opportunity to be there with him for that, but we'll congratulate him in person as well. We're very excited.
Absolutely, yeah, being the outstanding public transportation board member is a real big deal, so.
Wonderful, good. Well, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from our commissioners? Well, seeing and hearing none, in person and online, this concludes our meeting. Without objection, I adjourn, and we will see you again on October 5th.
4-9, well done, thank you.
Oh, well done.
Thank you. Look at that, 8:56.
Public transportation board is gonna be at the, oh, so that's